Hello students, let us see the typical elements students. So many students are asking, sir explain the typical elements. So student typical elements, when you are going to understand the typical element, these elements of the third period is known as typical element. So whatever the elements are there student, third period element, third period element. Third period elements, they are known as what student, that is third period elements are known as typical element. Okay, known as typical element of student, that is why they are known as typical elements, because these element, reason is there student, because these elements, what they do student, these elements represents the properties of group, represents the properties of properties of groups of other element, group of other element. So what they are saying is student, what they are saying, what is meaning of this, that is suppose we are having, that is sodium, magnesium, aluminum, silicon, phosphorus, sulfur, chlorine or argon. So these elements, what they are doing student, they are representing the properties of other elements of the same group. Okay, sodium is having the similar properties with potassium, magnesium is calcium, aluminum, that is gallium, so germanium, arsenic, selenium, bromine and krypton. So these way student, what they are having, these elements are representing the properties of the other element of the group, that is why they are known as typical element. So here is third period elements are called typical elements, give reason. Okay, one question is there. So third period, a group of 8 elements, namely sodium, magnesium, aluminum, silicon, phosphorus, sulfur, chlorine and argon, belongs to third period elements of the periodic table, are called the third row elements. The properties of such elements are characteristics of the group. That is what they are saying. Again, read out student, the properties of each elements are characteristics of the group to which they belongs. So suppose sodium belongs to group 1, so that is, it is having the similar properties to other elements of the group. Each one of these elements can therefore consider as a representative of whole group to the which they belongs. Hence the third row elements are known as typical or representative element. Now let us, why third period elements are called typical element. The properties of each elements are characteristics of the group to which they belongs. Each one of these elements can therefore be considered as representative of the whole group which this belongs to. Hence the third row elements are known as typical or representative element. So whatever, suppose student, there is sodium, potassium, rubidium, cesium and francium are there. So these elements are there student. What these element, this is sodium is third period, this belongs to third period. So these elements is representing the properties of other element of the group. So this is known as what student, sodium is known as what, typical elements student. This is sodium is known as typical elements, right? So next one, next let us read out what the other question they are saying student. So third period element, sodium, magnesium, aluminum, silicon, phosphorus, sulfur, chlorine are typical elements. They are called so because they represent the properties of their own group. No problem. To be more precise, if you want to study the properties of group 1, then you must better choose the sodium and you get the clue about the behavior of other elements. So if you know the properties of sodium, so you will be able to know the properties of potassium, rubidium, cesium and francium. So this is what the known as typical elements student. Now let us read out the one more question. A question is what student, here is question is there. To be obvious question, why not call second period elements are typical elements? The reason is simple. Scientists found that some anomalous properties in period number second elements, as they were not capable to represent the group reasons for the difference in their periodic properties, hence their chemical behavior are also. So first reason is small size of the second period element, second is high electronegativity and large charge ratio. So due to these three factor, their properties are they cannot represent the properties of other element of the group. So that is why they are not known as second period elements, are not known as typical element. Here they are no typical element, there is list of typical elements are there, student, typical elements. So what are there? Sodium is having the properties of alkali metal, magnesium alkaline earth metal, aluminum post transition metal, silicon metalloids, phosphorus reactive non-metals, sulfur reactive non-metals, chlorine reactive non-metals, and last one is noble gas. So these are sodium, magnesium, aluminum, silicon, phosphorus, sulfur, chlorine, argon are known as what, student? That is typical elements, right, student? Thank you so much for watching, friends.